So welcome back again. We have just seen example of non-experimental hypothesis testing. Now we'll see the example of experimental hypothesis testing. Okay, so we have already seen that if you are able to vary independent parameter, then we can say that it is experimental. If you are not able to vary the independent parameter, then we call it as what? We call it as a what? Non-experimental hypothesis testing. Now we'll see the example of non-experimental hypothesis testing. Now suppose our researcher randomly select the 50 students from the group of the students who have taken the course of statistics, and then divide them into the two groups randomly. Okay, first group 25 students, we'll call it as a group A. So there will be normal study program. So as usual, normal study program. And for remaining 25 students assigned to the group B, here we take a special study program. Okay. And at the end of the course, we conduct the test for each group and just judge the effectiveness of the training. Okay. Then we can see that in this example, this is an example of experimental hypothesis testing research, because in this case, independent variable, that is a training is varied. Okay. Here, what is the independent variable? That is the training program is varied. Okay. So that is the independent parameter. Okay. That is the independent parameter. Now we'll see the experimental group and control group. In case of experimental hypothesis testing, when the group is exposed to the usual condition means normal teaching to the statistics student. So that is the control group. Okay. But suppose if the group is exposed to some novel or special condition, then it is called as was experimental group. So we call experimental group if it is something different. Okay. Not as usual. Okay. But control group means what? It is as usual. That is called as control group, and something special or innovative or condition, that is called as what? Experimental group. Like an example above previous example, group A, the usual study of statistics. Okay. So it is a control group. And group B, where we applied some special tactic or special method for improving their performance, that is the experimental group. Okay, so both group A and B are exposed to the special study program, then both will be called as what? Experimental group. But right now only the group B is experimental group and group A is what is called as control group. Okay. So it is possible to design the study to include both experimental group. We can include either experimental group or control group or both. Okay, both group we can include. Okay, understood what is meant by control group and what is meant by experimental group. Now comes treatment. We already seen the treatment word we have used while discussing the principles of experimental design. So treatment is a different condition. Treatment is a different condition under which just a minute. Okay. So treatment is a different condition under which experimental or control groups are put. Okay. So it is a condition. Treatment is what? Condition under which okay. So what is meant by treatment? Treatment is a different condition under which experimental or control groups are put. Okay, that is called as treatment. So in previous example, there are two treatments: usual study program and special study program. So these are the two treatment in previous example. Okay. So there are two treatments, usual study program and special study program. Okay. Similarly, if you want to determine through an experiment the comparative impact of three variety of fertilizers on the yield of the wheat. So I have taken one more example about the three fertilizers on the impact of three varieties on the fertilizer. Okay, comparative study of impact of three variety of fertilizers on the yield. Okay, so here the each fertilizer variety will be treated as what? One treatment. So there will be three fertilizers, so there will be three treatments. Okay, like in our case of rice, two varieties of rice, then each variety is what? One treatment. Okay, so each variety will be one treatment. Now see what is meant by experiment. So experiment is process of examining the truth of hypothesis. Okay. What is meant by experiment? It is the process of examining the truth of hypothesis. That is called as what? Experiment. Okay. For example, we conduct the experiment to examine the usefulness of certain newly developed drug. Okay, so that is what? Experiment. Experiment can be two types of experiment. One can be absolute experiment, or other type of experiment can be comparative experiment. Okay. What is the experiment, absolute experiment? Here we only study the performance of particular thing. We don't compare with other. That is called as absolute experiment. But in comparative experiment, we compare with other thing, like performance of one drug is compared with the performance of another drug. Okay. Suppose we want to determine the impact of fertilizer on the yield of a crop. Okay. So it will be absolute experiment. Okay. What we are doing? We are determining the impact of fertilizer. Like now here, we were not comparing the fertilizer or crop. So we are just saying with and without fertilizer, what is the impact on the yield? Okay, so it is an absolute experiment. But when we want to determine the impact of one fertilizer as compared to the other fertilizer, then it becomes what? Comparative experiment. Okay. So most often, when we talk about the design of experiment, we generally take what? Comparative experiment. Okay. So absolute experiment is not useful because we just study the absolute effect of a particular fertilizer. Then it is not it is not useful. But when we compare with other fertilizer, then that can be useful. So which fertilizer is better, we can come to know. Okay. We know that fertilizers improves the yield of the particular crop, but our interest is what? Which one is better? What amount is better? Okay, so that comparative is most often it is very important. Now we'll see what is meant by experimental unit. So it is a predetermined plot or blocks where different treatment is applied. Like suppose there are many blocks here. Okay, so it is a predetermined block here. So suppose if I put here variety 1 and here I put the variety 2, then this is called as what experimental unit 1, this is experimental unit 2. So this is called as experimental unit. Okay. So we'll stop here. Thank you. If you have any doubt, you can ask in the WhatsApp group. Thank you.